1, 2, 3. Hey everyone, welcome back to Wonderland Wednesday.
We'll probably never do that again. Or maybe it'll be the new thing.
Let's get started.
All in the golden afternoon in fancy, let's pursue the dream child moving through a land of wonders, wild and new. In friendly chat with bird or beast, and half believe it true.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Wonderland Wednesday, and also to the iHeart podcast. My name is Jonathan North, and today's episode is a bit on the shorter side, at least as far as the podcast goes. It's a pretty standard length for a Wonderland Wednesday episode. I had considered taking a short break from the podcast after the Fantasia series, but I had this episode of Wonderland Wednesday that Sarah and I had recorded back in January, which had kind of gotten set aside as I started this podcast, and I hadn't had a chance to get to editing it. So I thought I'd try to finally get that up, and then I'd use it as an episode of the podcast at the same time. If you are listening to this on the podcast, I should let you know that I am tentatively planning to have this whole thing edited with film footage for my YouTube channel, as this is going to be a proper episode of Wonderland Wednesday, just like I used to do all the time back at the beginning of my channel. So if you'd like a full video version, make sure to check it out on my YouTube channel. However, technically this film is owned by Hallmark, which is one of many companies notorious for ignoring fair use laws on YouTube, so the video part may end up just be Sarah and me talking in her kitchen, which is fine, just not as fun as having our review intercut with movie footage. Oh well, I'm crossing my fingers in the hopes that they aren't guarding their old films as tightly as their new ones. Anyway, I suppose I should get into what this movie actually is. This is the black and white television version of Alice in Wonderland from 1955. As I said, this is a Hallmark film, aired as part of the Hallmark Hall of Fame series. Most people think of cheesy rom-coms when they think of a Hallmark movie, but Hallmark has a long history in entertainment that goes way back, much further than Christmas romance marathons, further even than the Hallmark Channel, and even further back than the Hallmark Hall of Fame series that I was familiar with in the 90s. Hallmark, of course, is most famous as a greeting card company, though I think that has been changing in recent years with the spike in popularity of their cable network, but they have been involved in the entertainment industry at least as far back as the 40s, and they have grown and evolved a lot since then. This is not the only Hallmark adaptation of Alice in Wonderland. My personal favorite version of the story was made by Hallmark in the 1990s, but I think this is the earliest television version of the story that still exists. I've heard of several earlier ones that were either performed live or recorded and then lost, all of which most likely have no existing copies left anywhere. Anyway, I think that's all I've got as far as history goes. Let's get on with the review. Today we're going to be talking about the 1955 Hallmark Hall of Fame version. This was not one that had really crossed my radar, at least I think Sarah mentioned she thought she'd seen it, but it was requested a week or two ago by Adam Shirk in one of the comments in another video, so...
I'd seen the title, not the actual movie, so this was fresh.
So we had a little bit of time, and this was kind of short, so we thought we'd knock one out.
Short enough.
We had some time.
Longer than a cartoon, but shorter than your average movie, so...
Yeah. This was a television movie, so it was basically, like, about the length of an episode or two of a show.
Yeah.
It was, I think, an hour and 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, so they probably maybe they had like 15 minutes worth of commercials or something. Who knows?
Probably. I don't really know how commercials worked back then. Some shows had more commercials than others. Commercials weren't quite the same as they were today.
That might have picked up more in the 60s. I don't know. Anyway.
We're rabbit trailing again.
Yeah. This one felt like it had... I felt like Alice's acting was a little bit like a play, like a little bit exaggerated, but not to the point where you hate it. And then in the end credits, I noticed that it was based off of the book, but also off of a play, which made sense the way they made it flow from scene to scene.
Mm-hmm. You could tell it was filmed on a big soundstage because she was like walking through a scene, and you could see as she left one part, it just went right into the next. Like, I think the Duchess's house was like right next to the mushroom. Things like that. Like, you could tell it was all one big place.
Go through one place, through a door, through another door. It was a little bit mishmashed because they put Through the Looking Glass and Alice in Wonderland together. So you have different things where they don't belong. But for the most part, I didn't mind it too much.
Mm-hmm. They made them mesh pretty well. It was kind of weird when they flipped from the trial scene right into the Red Queen scene. They basically just had the playing cards chase Alice out of the courtroom, and then she was in the woods with the Red Queen. So there wasn't that much of a transition, but it worked, I guess.
Also, it was a little bit odd with Tweedledum and Tweedledee and the Red King in that scene.
Yeah, they were just kind of inserted halfway through the Alice in Wonderland stuff.
But once again, I think that this version, I am between these two things. I feel like it is a version partly for people who already know what the story is like, but I think that it has enough entertainment value that a child could watch it, not really understand what was going on, but still get some enjoyment from it.
Yeah, it was simplified and, I don't know if, probably abbreviated somewhat.
It was abbreviated on different things. I didn't mind that they didn't take as long, like with the Hall of Doors.
Mm-hmm. They skipped the Sea of Tears, which was fine. It would have been hard to do. They had her anyway.
They had her go through the Looking Glass instead of down the rabbit hole, which was probably because it was in more of a play format.
Mm-hmm.
That had the most vocal kitten that I've ever seen on one of these. The girl who played Alice, I thought that she was between 8 and 10 years old. And it turned out that she was actually a teenager. So she must have been one of those people that seems young, and she seemed very fitting.
Yeah, she fit the Alice role perfectly. She was probably one of my top live action Alices.
I'd say so. Beautiful, long, light-colored hair, great British accent, adorable voice. She was very cute Alice. This was very much a British version, which I don't think I had really expected since it's Hallmark, but they must have imported it. And I'm thinking, I can't help but wonder how many of their films they got from elsewhere, and if somewhere in there I wonder if somewhere in there they started making their own and calling them Hallmark original movies. That's my own question, which if it doesn't have an answer for this review, I don't mind, but that just came to my mind when you have this British film in 1955 on the Hallmark Channel, and it's so different from the Hallmark that we know today.
Mm-hmm.
We recognized more than one of the characters in here. The Red Queen and the Griffin were both familiar
to people who know old Disney movies. The Red Queen especially was definitely Katie Nana from Mary Poppins.
And the Griffin was on a lot of old westerns, so I knew both his voice from Disney and his face from probably Bonanza.
Although you never see his face in this because he's wearing a giant griffin head.
But he has such a distinct voice that it stays with you. I feel like there was very little bad singing on this version. They did include singing, and some of the songs seemed like almost a version of a song from another version, just with a little twist on it, so I can't speak to how original it was. Also, the style of the music was fairly smooth throughout. It was mostly classical, a little bit of 50s jazziness thrown in there.
That might have partly to do with it being based on a play. So all the music would have been written for this play, which we didn't know at the time when we were making this observation, but now that we know it was a play.
Which I appreciate because we've watched it before where the style of music was just all over the place. And even when it was a play, that one play that we watched really varied a lot in the style of music. So, Alice's costume was pretty good. There were costumes that were hit and miss on this for me. I think the March Hare was one of the better March Hares that we saw. The Dormouse almost looked like an Australian creature to me rather than a mouse. But there were a couple of firsts on this version as far as characters. One was a male cook and a male queen. I had never seen that before. The Duchess was also a man who did nothing to try and mask his masculine voice. It was just a regular man's voice. It was some interesting choices in the characters in this version, but it kind of worked.
Yeah, it kind of did.
In a weird way.
They were entertaining, at the very least.
There were different random things in here that were actually quite amusing.
And the cook was roller skating, too.
Because why not? He had the sneaking suspicion that the cook was actually a clown in real life, but we weren't able to find out on the internet. So if anybody knows, if you see this, Mr. Cook, just leave a comment. Another thing that was, you probably didn't care, but oh my goodness, how many of these costumes were like glorified nylons? All over, just clinging all over. It's like this, the cards were like Last of the Mohicans, but with big bibs. It was just kind of, I mean, even the White Knight was highly elasticized. The Griffin, just the Mock Turtle. Like, what's with all of the spandex? Was spandex even a thing back then?
I don't know. It was a little odd, but it wasn't horrible on some costumes, but it was more noticeable on others. Especially when the cards were like turned to the side.
It's like you're not wearing enough, people. That was awkward. And it happened a lot. Like the characters in Your Old Father William, which that wasn't that surprising because it looked kind of like the illustration. And I don't know. I don't know if they were just trying to mimic the drawings or something within the book. But on live characters, it just didn't look good. It didn't look good. But a lot of people wouldn't care. That was... Ugh. Anyway, I'd say the narrator did a good job, and the narrator was a little bit different than they are sometimes on Alice's. I feel like the poem, the rhyme at the beginning was something I had never heard. There were little poetic type touches that I had never heard in other versions, but I think it worked pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And it ends with you actually seeing the narrator standing next to Alice. But his suit looks a little bit more modern day, so I don't know if that was supposed to take you back into the modern day and that this was a story that they were telling.
I don't know.
It's kind of an odd admixture of Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, and it kind of starts with Through the Looking Glass, transitions to Alice in Wonderland, has a sort of sprinkled in between, and ends with Through the Looking Glass.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have a lot of heavy complaints about that, considering considering how many versions we've watched. I think for a play, they did a pretty good job of blending it all together and keeping a lot of the spirit of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, I would rate this one fairly highly.
Yeah, it's definitely not on my lower end of the spectrum. We've seen some bad versions, and this would not be counted among them.
This one was humorous, it was sweet, it was fairly true to the book. The Alice in this was one of the closest to the book that I have seen.
Yeah.
She did a very good job. She was adorable, like I say. Overall, I think this is a version that some people could show to their kids, and that people who have read Alice will understand better, but like I say, I think could actually have some entertainment value for children.
Yeah, I would recommend this one.
Especially since it has all the songs. And
yeah, and the songs were actually not bad.
This is some of the better Alice in Wonderland music that we've ever heard. It's not perfect, but a lot of it was actually pretty good. Yeah,
with as many versions as we've seen, we know the spectrum. Some music in these versions can be pretty bad, and this wasn't.
Atrocious. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd say this one is on the higher end of middle of the road.
But yeah, I think this is one of the sweeter versions.
Yeah.
I hope that helps to shed some light on this version, and that the person who suggested it will be happy with the results. I don't know if this was this a near and dear childhood version, or just check it out. I don't know. Okay.
Well, I think that's going to be all for this episode. As with the last one, we don't know what we'll be doing next or when we'll be doing it next, but we have more planned. We just have to find time to actually watch and review them. So there are more coming. Just have to be surprised as to when they come.
And if anybody has any other suggestions, this one was good. Feel free to throw that stuff out.
Yeah, we're always looking for suggestions. Any good ones out there? We'd love to watch some good ones.
Old ones, BBC ones, definitely. Or if it's new and is surprisingly good, let us know.
Yeah.
Kind of like that 1990s one that looked like it was going to be total cheese and ended up having Lionel and stuff in it. Anyway.
Yeah, that one's like on that one's one of my favorites now, I would say.
That one was like amazingly mind volcano. Anyway, we're using up film space. Okay.
Okay, well, I think that'll be all for today, so we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening and or watching. I'm currently scheduling my next few guests, so I think the next episode will probably be another one with Sarah. I've been visiting back home this past week, and we were able to record several episodes in a row to get me stocked up. One of the episodes we recorded was our review of the semi-obscure Disney film The Reluctant Dragon, and I mean the live-action film, not just the animated short that is featured in that film, which more people are likely to be familiar with. We're talking about the whole thing, and it is something. So that'll be the next episode. We'll see you then.